everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we will discuss how to get the most from your Phrase TMS subscription. I will introduce the speaker for today, David McNamee. He is an enterprise solutions engineer. He did the last webinar for you as well, and we had great feedback on your presentation, David, so we're happy to have you again. Hi, and yeah,
Good to hear.
floor is yours.
All right. Hey, we just finished all of the slides for the entire presentation. Who's excited about that? I know I am. Uh, all right. Thanks for taking your time today, morning, afternoon, early evening, wherever the heck you happen to be. We're going to look at a couple of different things. They're all really related to monitoring and managing your phrase environment. This is kind of the boring stuff for a lot of people, but it gets us into things like how do we know where we're spending our money? How do we understand how some of these metrics come in? Because we are now looking at a situation where we have to sort of decode things like managed words, processed words, MTUs, AIUs, EIEIO. One of those is fake, by the way. So we're going to walk around and kind of look at the platform. I want to show you where to find these measurements. We're going to talk about how they get measured. But I'm also going to point you to the actual documentation where these things are laid out because it's a little bit of challenge to keep things in your head as you first get introduced to them with all of these different names and metrics and multipliers and weighted things and whatnot. So we'll kind of get into that. Um, and as we go through the reporting and the metrics and the monitoring and understanding where you are, we'll kind of wrap up with a few things that you can do to really understand the impact and control some things and make sure that as you get sort of to the top end of your limits for whatever phrase plan you're on, you can stay within them. You know, if you are growing and you're increasing the number of languages that you're translating into, you're increasing the different teams that are participating in translation, then okay, great. Growth is wonderful. We can talk about ROI and things like that and justification on another conversation, right? Here, we're really concerned about how do we know where we are within our limits and what to do to proactively stay within those limits as well. So, as Clara said, any questions, please plop, sure, into Slido. Really, sometimes I do speak English, and we'll answer questions as they come up. All right, let's talk. Here we have the phrase dashboard. Now, if you do not have administrative permission, if you do not have ownership rights in the phrase instance of your organization, enjoy the show because you're not going to be able to access some of the things that we're gonna talk about here. We're gonna look at the platform piece for a bit. We're gonna look at the tooling piece here for a little bit, try to decode some of the terminology um, and um, and then take it from there. From a monitoring perspective, there's a couple of places that we can go. At an administrative level, at a suite level, we're interested in the subscription overview. We're interested in invoices and billing too. So here in organization settings, if I have permission, I can see product usage. Sorry, I get a great discount, guys, for being friends and family. But this is going to give me the usage in my current billing cycle. I'll also see things like, which add-ons do I have tacked on to my plan. But this will show me, yeah, here's how we're doing. Are we in danger of hitting any of our caps, any of our limits in this particular billing cycle? And you can see in my case, I'm actually pretty safe. But we'll want to start to break down and understand some of these limits. Um, Phrase orchestrator, phrase custom AI, these are pretty straightforward ones to understand. It's a raw number. You have so many phrase orchestrator definitions that you can deploy right? You can keep a whole bunch in design and development and archive them, whatever, but you'll have so many in your grant that you can have running. Phrase custom AI, this is the number of deployed models. So when you go and use Phrase custom AI, if that's a part of your plan, and you train an instance of a Phrase AI on your own content, you have a max number of instances that you can deploy, and we'll be able to see that here, keep track of that, and you could have things deployed concurrently into multiple profiles of Phrase Language AI. So there's some things there. The other four that are left, we're going to explore a bit because these have some real meaning behind them, and sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. So to dive more deeply into these metrics, processed words in TMS, managed words and strings, MTUs, that's machine translation units in Phrase Language AI, and the AI units, which is tied to some of the generative AI tools that have been released in the last 6 months or so. Let's look at more detailed analytics. So from my subscription overview, I can dive into a little more detailed report. And this is nice because this will give us a nice line where our limit is. We can see some historical information, so we can kind of see, are we growing? Are we trending down? What does that actually look like? Now, in the case of TMS processed words is really anything that goes through the translation management system. When you submit a piece of content to the TMS, it is opened by the filters. The translatable text is extracted. We apply translation memory matches based off of the rules of your project. We apply machine translation based off of the rules inside of your project. We do some other tasks. So there's a lot of heavy lift that happens inside of the TMS as soon as your project is loaded, as soon as your job is loaded. So anything that goes into TMS gets counted as a processed word immediately. There are very few exceptions to that. Now, this can be confusing for folks because if you're working with a language service provider, a vendor, that you hand over content to, they typically have something called a weighted word count or a net rate word count, something along those lines. And it's where you have your discounting for the actual translation work, where they say, yeah, if it's a repetition, it doesn't count, reps are free. If we're in the 100% matching, we charge you a couple pennies for review. If it's 84 to 94, then you get a discount on it, and if it's below a certain threshold, you're paying full price for the actual translation work. All that stuff doesn't matter inside of Phrase TMS. We can help you calculate that. We can help you estimate that, but you're going to have that be counted as a weighted word. Clicking that link here, and sorry, we have a nice handy shortcut now from the suite analytics into Phrase TMS analytics and into strings analytics. Yes, I said strings analytics if you haven't seen that yet. And this will take us directly into the volume in Phrase Analytics. So we can deep dive here and see where our per word activity is coming from. So this is since this January. So this is current quarter. You can adjust this, and this data will map nicely to what's been going on in the billing reports and the quarter. So you can do some analysis here. You can do some work. You can see where your activity is and start to make some decisions of, oh my gosh, we are really doing a lot more processed words than maybe we anticipated. It's a common issue as we start to approach people who are reaching their limits and they're new to the TMS. They don't realize that every time I go into a project inside of the TMS and just say, yeah, hey, I'm gonna let me pick a random project here. Um, go in and okay, that was yesterday, but that's fine. We can still play with that. Got some files in here. When I hit new job and I select a piece of content, whether it's from my desktop or from some online source, we're going to have all of the words in here. Let's see, just pick that one. It's nice and tiny. All the words here count as a processed word. Not only that, but you're going to have a multiplier, right? So this document that I chose, it's not very big, a couple hundred words max, but we're going to multiply that by the languages that have been asked for a target. Because it has to be processed multiple times, we do the initial break, but then we have to go back through and do TM match for each of the languages. We have to do machine translation, candidate translations for each of the languages requested. We're doing quality analysis, spell check, grammar, all those different things across each of the languages. So you're really multiplying by the number of languages that you are requesting when you upload that piece of content. So here, we'll upload this, and we'll be able to see our new piece of document here. Do I have my words? No, don't have that in this view, but um, we'll see that it's in here as 3 jobs. So each of these jobs contributes to the processed word count. We're going to talk in a few minutes about optimization and some of the things that we can do to minimize the impact of that. But don't be surprised when you add a piece of content that you are going to see that that word count maybe spike up a little bit higher than you were potentially anticipating. On the phrase.com website, we get into this great article called "Cost-Effective Word Management for TMS." We'll talk about some of the tips that are in here and talk about a couple of other tips. But that definition of the total number of words in the source times the number of languages that are going to be translated. That formula is pretty basic. It's documented here. Some good examples of that, and we can dive into that a little bit later. Obviously, there will be exceptions for languages that are not sort of alphabet based, like the Latin languages. So if you have, ideogram based languages and other languages out there, there'll be some math to do that. But the same principle applies. You will see a growth in that processed word count a little bit quicker than maybe you're expecting. So, want to pause? That's a lot of information for the first 10 minutes, and maybe shock some people. So, Clara, anything in the Q&A yet that we need to address?
No questions so far.
All
I'll
right.
paste the link again into the chat just in case people overlooked it.
Now, processed words applies to phrase TMS. Okay, and phrase TMS is sort of a transitory tool. I like to talk about it in those terms. And what I mean by it's a transitory tool is we submit content, work gets done, automated work gets done, manual work gets done, and at the end of the project, there's an actual end, right? It's finished. So the project completes, it closes, we're done, we go away. Phrase strings, on the other hand, as I move down to the next graph in the string of reports here, strings is designed to be durable. So it's not just, hey, I'm going in and creating a project. I'm going in and I'm doing some jobs. These stick around. These typically are the string fragments that you're using in a software development project Software development is a long-running thing. You deploy an app to iOS, you deploy a website that's been custom built for you. You're going to keep that around for years, probably. And that's why strings has a different focus. It focuses on managed words. So these are the number of words that are actually being kept in the strings vaults, if you will, over time. And we can see our limit, we can see what's been consumed, we can get a good idea if we're approaching our top end. And just like with TMS, the number of languages matters. So if you have, 1,000 words in your project as a source, but you have, an additional 5 languages that you're storing, great. Then you're going to multiply that by 5, and you're going to have 5,000 managed words that are being kept around inside of phrase strings. So if we look at phrase analytics inside of phrase strings, and this is a bit recent, this might be new to some folks who have used phrase strings in the past, we can see that we're getting, good volume analytics just like we do in TMS. The focus is a little bit different because, it's the individual words, and phrase strings revolves around that concept of keys. Everything's got a key name, so it's really interesting to see how many keys we have, and also be able to see our growth, our activity. Well, November was really big. Pulled down a little bit from there. We can see which projects are really driving our activity, what our big hefty ones are, where the keys are. So we've got a huge amount in this couple of projects here, and be able to align this translation sources. This will tell us if we're using machine translation, translation memory, or we've got some user activity going in to actually update those live. So similar concept. It's a bit straightforward, right? There's not a whole lot to worry about, but you do want to take into account that there is expansion as you have languages there. Now, it's not so much the fact that a language has been defined, it's that there's actual words being stored. So if you have, a 1,000 source word project in English, and you've only got half of that needed for your Spanish language project for whatever reason, great. You divide that in half. You've only used 500 of those slots, so it's not the blank spaces being counted and the math automatically being done. It's how much is being there. But as you're preparing and planning out your projects, you do want to keep that in mind and have a peek at your limits, what's been defined on your phrase subscription to make sure that you are inside of that space. Okay. Again, from a documentation perspective, um, we should see, oh, that's exceeding capacity. This is going to be a good one just to talk about some other things, but yeah, there is a strings managed word article that is going to help you define what that means. And again, A times B, number of words in the source by the number of languages. Fun things, branches don't count. So if you are using a branching strategy in phrase strings, great. Don't worry about it. We're not going to spike your totals because of that. Also, linked keys, which makes sense because we're referencing back to a source project rather than duplicating the value for that key over and over and over again. So, neat things along the edges to try and keep the totals from exploding unnecessarily. All right. Now, MTUs, machine translation units. This is going to start to get a little complicated because we have different scenarios where machine translation is being used, and you may have made different choices about your relationship with the different machine translation engines. There is a calculation that you'll need to internalize. You'll understand this. I'll show you the documentation here in a second. But machine translation uh, uh, charges are typically character based. Up until now, we've been talking about words, right? So we have processed words in TMS. We have managed words in phrase strings. This is all along the word concept. But machine translation engines in the industry typically don't charge by word, they charge by character. There's a whole backstory and discussion about why that is, why the industry has gone there. But if you've ever asked a linguist to define what a word is, you probably have a good idea of why we've all agreed to sort of settle on character because it's the thing that we can mostly sort of agree on to define as a billable unit. So you will submit content to a machine translation engine. It will count the number of characters. Again, it will take into account some variations for languages that are ideograph based or based off of different writing systems and come up with a character count, and that's your number of characters, right? So we help with that calculation. We will manage our machine translation units the same way, the same metric. You got the nice graph here to show us where we are. And there's going to be a couple of places to look at your machine translation unit usage. So if I click the magic button here and take a look at MT usage, this is going to take me into Phrase Language AI. So hopefully everyone has had a chance to use Phrase Language AI, at least explore it, because there are multiple benefits to using phrase language AI. The language auto select so that you can have multiple engines in a cohort, and the best one is automatically selected for you based off the content submitted. Things like quality performance score are very much tied to things that are happening in phrase language AI. And the utilization there is impacted by using phrase language AI. So when you have the number of characters for your content, your MT unit charge is going to be a combination of what features, what machine translation features are you using? That's going to be a weight, and which engine is being utilized. So anytime you use phrase language AI, you are being charged half a character, right? You're being your quota is being impacted by a half a character. So for every character you submit, a half a character is being deducted from that total just by virtue of using phrase language AI, um, for its features, auto select, and all the great work that happens inside of MT profiles. Then we take into account which engine is actually being used. So if I look at one of my phrase language AI profiles, I have Amazon, Microsoft, Depot, Google, our internal engines that we've built and provided for you. I've got Tencent. Rosetta's turned off. There are other managed engines that we can add to that. But depending on which one of these is actually selected by Phrase Language AI, uh, you will be impacted by, either a half a character for the sort of general ones like Amazon, Microsoft, Depot, etc. For Tencent, for Rosetta, those are more expensive engines to utilize. So you are impacted by a full character. So after you account for using phrase language AI just as a feature and using the particular machine translation engine, you might be impacted by a character, you might be impacted by two characters. It just depends on that math. There is a good definition out there for how that's calculated. It's called MT consumption and weights. Okay? You'll be able to see this in the general phrase documentation. It's under the TMS side of the house. Um, this shows when the calculation happens. Um, you know, pre-translation generally is where a lot of that usage is going to come from. But the engines have their um, specific weights. Phrase Language AI has a service weight that is always there. And then if I scroll down a bit more, we'll see, when do we see an impact if we're using the translation engine previews in cat editors. There is an impact there, so that will drive up potentially your utilization of machine translation units. And then we keep going down here and we can see the weights, right? So, oh, Rosetta is actually heavier than I remembered. Glad I looked at the table. 10 cents less than it used to be, so that's gone down. That's fantastic. So if we use, say, DeepL through Phrase Language AI, then we are going to be impacted in our usage by one character, right? Because that's a point 0.5 plus a point 0.5, that's one. So it is per character at that point. If we happen to be using Rosetta through Phrase Language AI, then that's going to be a 2.5 character impact per character based off of that. So that is one of the reasons why when you look at your um, limits. Okay? I've got a 25 million character limit in this particular instance because we use machine translation over and over again. So as part of your prescription, description, prescription, subscription, that's the one that I want. As part of your subscription, we want to make sure you have plenty of room. We don't want machine translation because it's so inexpensive from an actual money perspective to be a real limiting factor in what you do inside of the phrase platform. A lot of the hyper automation discussions that we have with customers who are trying to automate as much of their localization process as possible depends on machine translation. So we have very, very large grants at every level of subscription so that you shouldn't have to sweat this number too much. But you can have runaway projects. You can have accidents. So being able to see where your machine translation activity is, where that's coming from, and what's going on there is really, really important. Okay? Now, if you are in a position where you're not using phrase language AI, and I want to talk to you if you're not, we want to understand that. But there are scenarios where maybe I've gone out and I've done some investment in using a particular engine, and we want to, yeah, here we go. Have a specific, connection. I've got a separate contract with Microsoft, maybe a separate contract with DeepL, and I want to utilize these because I've invested in training, and I want to use these directly for certain languages rather than using phrase language AI to auto select. That is valid. That's still a valid scenario. Um, you are going to have a different bucket of usage, and you will be able to see this third-party standalone metric from here. So I've done some things with Microsoft Translator. We've submitted 1,000 characters through there, and that's really not an impact to your MT unit calculation. This is going to be something that you're contracting directly with Microsoft or DeepL or Amazon or Systran or whomever you've got configured as an MT engine, which is why for standalone engines, there's so many more that we integrate with. This list is absolutely gargantuan. But these don't necessarily have the same trust inside the system to be inside of phrase language AI. So that's why they're kept separately. And you can have a translation strategy, an automation strategy that uses both standalone third party through the direct connection, or uses phrase language AI for that translation. Okay. This MTU article, this machine translation article, is really, really handy to get into that space and help you predict your workloads as you are working on your budgets. We go back to the subscription overview and take a look at the metrics. We have a recent addition to the family of metrics, and this is the AI units. So an AI unit is anything that's connected to the generative AI capabilities inside of Phrase. So there are scenarios where instead of using a traditional machine translation tool, we have AI that is separate and is actually doing content generation as a part of the process. So you'll think about in-phrase strings, uh, auto adapt, if you've used that. You're being able to say, yes, I have a phrase string that's stored, and I want to shorten it, lengthen it, make it more professional. I want to have the AI do that for me. That will count against your AI units. If you are using auto LQA, and hopefully everyone has had a chance to see the discussions about auto LQA, because it's really an important tool, because it will not only flag and categorize potential errors in your translation, but it will make suggestions. And because it's generating those suggestions and providing that to your reviewers, the AI units are there. And we'll also have auto adapt for TMS available through Phrase Orchestrator. That's going to have an impact as well. So AI utilization through the platform, you do want to plan carefully, because it is something that it has an impact. It has an expense, at least in terms of how you're using it against your monthly allocations. So it's not a tool that's one of those things that you're going to use everywhere, the way that we see MT being used everywhere. This is going to be something that's used in specific scenarios. There's not a separate AI unit dashboard anywhere, because the toolings are pretty disparate, right? There's things in strings, there's things in TMS, there are things in Orchestrator that can have an impact there. But if we look at this piece of documentation, the AI unit calculation, it's actually tucked under the global administration section of the documentation website. So I know sometimes it's a little tricky to kind of guess which category some of these things belong to when they cross over so many different parts of the platform. But this is in the global admin section, and we can see that auto LQA is one word. We're back to word counts again. One word is pretty much one AIU. One AI action is going to be based off of word count. So the target language is more important here than the source language. So in um, phrase strings, managed words, in phrase TMS, processed words, we're really looking at the source words and looking at impacting our grants, our utilization rather, based off of those source word counts. In this case, we want to see how much is being created by the AI. So how many words are coming in the target language, and that's what we'll count in the quota there. So that's a lot. I mean, that's going through each of these different units that we have here. Processed words, managed words, like I said, that's source driven, and word based machine translation units. That's driven by your source characters. AI units is driven by your target characters. Lots to keep track of, but we do have that detailed reporting as you saw that you can get to, and we have some very lovely descriptions in the documentation in case you get lost and want to have a hand in it. Keeping control over utilization is going to be really, really important. And there are a few tips, especially inside of TMS, because we get a lot of stress from people around, oh, processed words, because there's a multiplier based off of, the number of languages that I'm translating into. We can see that really grow a lot over time. And, with TMS, we have these scenarios where we have ad hoc utilization through the AI portal or through a submitter portal, something like that. Maybe we have a connector that's monitoring a specific set of locations in a remote storage like Box.com or Contentful or Drupal or WordPress, and we've got that automation there. So there's this risk of accidental overruns. How do we control that better? It's a couple things. First and foremost is we do recommend that periodically you get into your TMS and you just do a little bit of an audit, right? Taking a look, looking at the reporting, see what projects are open. Should they still be open? Is there still an opportunity for people to go in and do translation work against this, without necessarily being under the eagle eye of your localization project manager? There's also some things that we can do from an automation perspective. We want to make sure that when you are working in highly automated scenarios, that you don't have languages that aren't necessary. You may have a situation, and actually, let me pull up a new project template that I know has just a lot of languages assigned to it. I've got 9 here. Now, I do have clients where 9 is like, oh my gosh, that's a day off for us, right? They're looking at, 35, 40 languages or more. But whatever the scenario, whether, you think 9 is a lot or 45 is a lot, when you've got this automation driven by templates, try to keep this list under control because a lot of the automations just automatically ask for translation in every language that's available on the template. So when I create a project based off of this template, whether it's driven fully by automation or driven by me manually submitting something through Portal or through just desktop upload, you see that hey, uh, it's asking for all the languages straight off. That's the default. Okay. So if you're manually doing things as a project manager, less of a thing, less of a big deal. You can, go in and turn some of these off. But if I've got an APC, an automated product project configuration rolling through, and just picking up that template, it's going to ask for all 9 languages at once. So we may want to pull some of those out of the template unless we know that that particular piece of content, that content type is going to always be universally available to all the languages that we want to support. That's a big thing, is looking at those templates. Another thing to look at, particularly with automated project creation, and here I have a list of APCs defined. Um, these are, if you've never seen an APC before, an automated project creation, you create a connector, you define a connector to your content source, and then the APC, you tell it, hey, go and watch it. So if I scroll down to my monitoring section real quick, I'm saying, yeah, here I'm looking at a box.com folder. Now this could be, a contentful set of content types. It could be SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever. I'm monitoring it. I'm using that as a drop location. When something is new, something is updated, I want something to happen, and it will be based off of some rules that I have up at the top here. So when I define this during creation and export, I've got two options. And in this case, I've chosen the top one, which is to create a continuous project when new content or updated content happens. I do have a project template that I've selected. I do have languages that I've selected, so I do have some control here, so I can keep an eye on that a bit. Um, and yeah, creating a new project every time that has an impact on processed words. So everything that I've talked about during this last hour, 45 minutes, is yeah, when we have content coming in, we count the number of source words, we multiply by the number of languages that are being asked for, and then that's our processed word count. When we have continuous projects, though, and if I make an update instead of a continuous project, then the weighted word count is only going to be impacted by the number of source words that are in modified segments. Right? So what that means is, you know, it's a savings, if you will, when I do updates. Right? Because I'm only going to be impacted by the number of words that are in that segment. So if I go into my box environment and I pick on this PowerPoint doc that's there, let me go ahead and open that in online PowerPoint, and I need to make a quick update. Um, let's just say, all right, that's not my job title. Um, solutions doesn't matter, right? Titles are so silly, but it's done. It's saved. It's gone out the box. Um, that update has happened. Super. So now my APC is going to go out there and trigger an update. I do have a project already in flight. Okay, we're pretty deep into it. We've got things in quality assessment. But the third step that I have in my workflow, but now based off the rules in my APC, we'll kind of reset the game here a little bit and start over. We're going to move back to step one, and we'll retranslate the pieces here. But my processed word count is only going to be impacted by the number of words in that one segment. Let me refresh and see if it's picked it up yet. Let me go back to pre-translate. So rather than being impacted by, okay, yeah, you can see we're in process of pre-translating, so this is catching up to me. But the increment to processed words is just going to be, I think there were a total of 5 words in that segment. So 5 times 3 will be 15, rather than the 300 words that are in the entire document, which would be, 3 to 900 words. That's a difference, right? So you can start to see how those things can explode. 15 versus 900, that's a big difference. If you have a project that is frequently updating, okay, that's going to be one of the determining factors of if you want to look at using continuous projects to try and keep your processed words under control instead of phrase TMS. That is an important distinction because sometimes projects will finish, we'll close out the project, and then there won't be a change for 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. Well, at that point, you've probably already archived the project. You're not going to reopen it. But if you have one of those projects where the source is changing a lot because the content owners, they're still making up their minds, they're still trying to agree on the terminology that's being used. Maybe they began the localization process too early, they weren't settled yet. Great, let's minimize those high turnover edits at the beginning of a project as best as we can and use uh, continuous projects. You can do that manually too. So the APCs, the automated project creation, will see that that option right here at the top. Do we want a continuous project or a new project every time? And notice it's locked right now. So once we start, if I change my mind, then I need to redefine a new APC for this. But manually, as a project manager, I can come in to my jobs, and I can update the source. Right. So this will be the same sort of scenario. Oh, it's already been completed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll catch up there. But I can upload my updated source manually, and it will be sort of the same impact as your uh, uh, continuous localization jobs, in which we'll calculate the impact differently, the impact to uh, processed words, that is, and only take into account the number of words in the segments that have been modified. Okay? So we have hit a lot in the last 50 minutes. There's a lot to review for you. There's some great documentation to make that happen. Let me get back to my subscription overview. We're not going to deep dive into Orchestrator or custom AI. Those are pretty straightforward things to count. We don't have calculations that really impact there. Although we do have AI involved, so there might be some impacts to the AI unit counts, machine translation counts over time. But again, those are pretty straightforward. So being able to understand this utilization, be able to understand how it's impacted over time, it's going to make a difference as you manage these different parts of the Phrase platform. At this point, we've got just about 10 minutes left in our scheduled time together. I want to thank you for spending that time with us and learning about the platform. Clara, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any questions hanging out in Slido. If anybody wants to get their questions in real quick before we wrap up, but I think we have covered the key things we had in the agenda.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I don't see any questions as we speak at the moment, so everything you've covered seems to be clear as day.
Everyone's asleep. We know this. We know this.
Or everyone is looking at their own phrase account and exploring.
That's what I hope. So as you go through your own content, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Phrase support. Always there to help answer those questions. If you are on a plan that has a dedicated customer success manager, congratulations, you've got somebody awesome working with you, and they can help answer questions you may have about how calculations are happening, or if you perceive that there might be a disparity in what you're seeing and what you're expecting.
All right. Still no questions, so I think we can wrap it up. Thank you very much, David, for everything you've shown today. I think this is super useful for our users. Also, thank you for showing all the documentation. Hopefully, if anybody needs more help, they can find answers in those articles. And yeah, thank you very much for spending the time with us. We have a short survey for you at the end of this webinar. As we close the session, the survey will pop up. We will appreciate it if you let us know what you thought of the session, if you found it helpful. And also you can share your tips on what you would like to see next. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye bye.